All right. So I'm just going to just a little bit of information about myself. Again, my name is Tao Hill. I'm with GovList. I'm part of the customer acquisition and success arm of GovList. I've been working in the software industry, particularly with government solutions, for more than 20 years. I got my start when I was about 22, working for the Louisiana legislature and the governor's office back in, like I said, about 20 years ago. And then kind of moved into the municipal government and working with local agencies with a company called Granicus, where we did a lot of like multimedia integration, legislative workflow, really learning about how software and cloud software can really make some transformative change to government processes. And then did some work with a company called GovDelivery, where we were helping governments with their marketing plans. So that's kind of where my background. I'm really, really excited to be part of the GovList team, and just kind of give a little bit of background, of GovList and what we do before we get started. So these are the kinds of things that we hear out in, when we're talking with our customers and prospective customers today. And so, because of these woes that we hear about, particularly, the losing institutional knowledge when it comes to someone leaving, and not really having a place to put that, and that causing sort of a really big sort of a gap in when we're training folks that are coming on new, and when you're building solicitations, et cetera. And so what we've done is we are a software company that helps solve some of those big issues by allowing you to write RFPs and solicitations in a short amount of time through these guided, modularized, accessible processes. And we really focus on helping you find exceptional vendors who are really good at what they do, not necessarily good at responding to RFPs. And so that's what we're actually going to talk about today, is how some of the things that you can do right now to help invite more local vendors to participate in your process, to understand the process, and even just to find out about the process and about the projects that you're working on. We hear that a lot about just being able to, wanting to connect more with your local community and finding ways to do that in a way that doesn't really inundate you, but allows you to do some creative work in your community. So we're going to start off just by talking a little bit about some of these 5 things that we were talking about in setting up our webinar. The first one is, and this is not anything that's new, right? Defining your RFP sections. There's templates out there that folks follow. Again, this isn't something that's new, but informing vendors and the public that you have one, and then providing language in the RFP that walks you through the thought process of each section is definitely something that we might take for granted just because we're just in it all the time. So I'd like to talk about a story of, just because I've been working in responding to RFPs for more than 20 years, really, and I feel like I've done so fairly successfully with the companies that I've worked with. One of the practices that I've gotten into, just because I don't know from organization to organization like how things, what their format is and what their expectations are about responding to RFPs, is a lot of times I'll print them out and sort of lay them out on the floor page by page, partly because I go through each section and I create like a classification of whether this section that I'm reading is about how I'm supposed to respond, or is it a section about what the requirements are for the project? Are these reporting requirements? Is this something that has to do with just like how the RFP is run? Is this something around like the scoring criteria? And so I actually literally take different color highlighters and I go through the RFP, because I do see table of contents that are titled certain ways, but within those sections sometimes some of the pieces might actually end up in the wrong place. And so because I see that happen a lot, this is what I end up doing is I end up sort of laying everything out and starting over and sort of like deconstructing it and then reconstructing it again so that I can come up with a really good response. So I also see that there are folks out there like, we've been talking with folks in the state of Oregon, and I'll just show this real quickly, that have these really wonderful RFP templates. You can go out right now today to their public website and find these great templates that they have that allow you to, do some pretty, do some amazing things with the language that they have. And this is, as I'm bringing this up, this is what it, what it looks like. So it's great because it has all of these sections that are in it, and that really sort of help guide you in how to respond. The problem with this can be that it can, if the public doesn't know that you actually have this and they don't know the intent behind it, then, and also your internal staff, if they don't know the intent behind it, then that can, that can become, there can be some disconnects that happen there. And so there's so many people who are working in these sections that sometimes like we lose the purpose and the expectations of what those sections are. Come back over here. So if I know that someone is using a template and I read the purpose behind the template and the structure, then all of the solicitations, all of a sudden they make a lot more sense to me. And you probably have about 10 minutes or so to provide an explanation of why you choose the format for your template in a way that guides them. Finally, training that's in context may actually lead to a more desirable experience for a vendor who's responding for the first time. And let me just kind of show you an example of what that might look like. So, within each section of an RFP, this is an RFP that we have in the GovList software. At the top of each section, there's just a little description about what this section is all about and what we're looking for. If you're providing submission instructions, then this is just a checklist and overview, of what the intent is behind this. And it's also the same instructions that are offered to the internal staff as well. So there's, and it's also training in context. So it's not like big documents that you're using to train folks, but rather it's actually providing the training in context of the document. All right. I just I want to stop and check to make sure that everyone is okay with the audio. I'm getting a couple of notes that maybe like the audio is cutting out for some folks, and I'm not sure if it's here for me or if it's on their end as well. Okay, great. I'm hearing that the audio is good for most folks out there, so I appreciate that. Awesome. All right, so let me just come back over here to the presentation here. So here's a couple of examples that I just want to go through real quickly on this, right? Like one of the sections that I read about the other day, and it was interesting because it's something that you see a lot of is the terms of the contract. The vendor selected will enter into a 3-year contract with 2 renewal years. Where would that fall? Would that actually fall in the beginning of the document, the beginning of the RFP? Would it fall inside of their defining of the scope of work? Because they need to know that they need to be available to do this work for this time of the contract. Does it fall within a pricing table? Does it fall within the terms and conditions of the RFP itself, or would it fall in sample contract language? So it's that kind of understanding of where this type of language would fall, and and having that in the proper place so that the vendor is guided properly. It can get kind of confusing. Another one is the expectation that a vendor must have certain equipment. Where would that fall? I actually saw that in a terms and conditions section, but to me it really felt like that it belonged kind of somewhere else. And then finally, that finally the example of how asking the vendor to respond a certain way. Responding vendor must describe their project approach. And would that be inside of a scope of work? Would that be inside of a submission instructions area of the RFP? All right, so we're going to move on to the next one. And this is around connecting with community communications. So within your organization, a lot of times there's already channels that are in place to connect with your community, right? So I bring up these organizations like 3CMA, the City County Communications and Marketing Association, the International Association for Public Participation, because likely within your organization, there's going to be someone who's a member of this of these professional organizations, in the same way that you might be, a member of NIGP, of course. And I know that you likely know this, but when I look at websites, around like press releases that are being run by the communications group, and I see, ways for folks to be able to sign up for notifications. A lot of times you don't really see like a place for people in the community to receive notifications about RFPs and bids. And I really think that might be coming from the fact that we've gotten so used to registering or expecting vendors to register inside of a vendor registration database, which has its place and it's really good. But when it comes to connecting with my community, I don't think we're going to actually find a lot of folks in those vendor registry databases that are the local vendors in the community and people who are interested in what's going on in your local government. It just ends up not being the place where folks sign up because they're interested in getting other news from the city and they can get that in another place. And so in a very, very easy way, you can just reach out to those communication officers and start connecting with them. Normally these subscriptions for email notifications have topics. I want to sign up for city council meeting agendas. I want to sign up for events that happen in with parks and recreation. I want to be able to sign up for when solicitations or when RFPs come out or opportunities to do business. And so that's a really, really easy way for just to make that connection through existing channels that are already there. So I also provided a few examples of how social media can really make an impact. What you see in the upper left-hand corner is a Twitter feed, and they've got some pictures, they've got some creative language about announcing an opportunity to create custom signage and street paint design, at an intersection. And so they're doing this through their Twitter feed. And the second one that you see here is actually something that I saw pop up on my LinkedIn feed about grants and awards for RFPs that were issued from an agency in Maryland. And you see there are folks that are liking it, there are folks that are commenting on it. They're networking with the other folks that they know. The one that I have here is actually one that I did through conversations that I've been having with one of my customers, and that is around them wanting to get some information about government websites as a service. And so I just posted it on my LinkedIn, and because I've been in this industry for a long time, working in the software industry, I was able to get nearly 1,000 views on that one particular post. And then have some folks that respond. Shout out to Chris O'Donnell who responded to me, and Rebecca Carr who I know from my municipal clerk days. Chris O'Donnell works for an open source, Drupal-based website development company, and so they're able to not only give me some good information, but also confirm that these vendors are recommended. And all I had to do was just post it to my LinkedIn site. So what I'll do in this is just quickly show over on this side here, is we have some really easy ways inside of our software for you to be able to do automatic notifications of your RFPs and your RFP language, just by clicking on a button and having that come up. You can type in some language, give it some hashtags, and off you go. So that's one of the features of being able to to have software to help you build RFPs, is that you have these landing pages that you can just quickly, just with one button, you can link out to your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Facebook feeds, etc. So there we go. So I'm actually I'm trying out an interesting feature of our webinar, which is being able to publish a poll. So if you can see that, if you get a moment, I would love to be able to get your feedback on that. All right, so let's come back over here. All right, so that was the second idea, is around connecting with your existing community connections, whether it be social media, through your existing communication channels. There are things that are already in place that you can take advantage of today. The third thing is around how openness and transparency can lead to more folks that are trusting the process, and therefore more willing to participate in it. How we evaluate vendors can have a really big impact on the perception of fairness. By clearly stating the criteria in the RFP and objectively scoring on those, that's a really good place to start. And also by keeping complete and auditable records. And these are things that we're already doing. Keeping complete and auditable records and letting them know that you do can also really, it cements public trust in the event of an objection. I was actually speaking here in California recently with a city clerk that I know who handles FOIA requests. And she said to me, I get a lot of requests to see the results of how a contract was evaluated and scored. And I know we have them, and I even go back to finance and legal or the department head that's providing the service. And over half the times they have no idea where it is. So somewhere was an Excel spreadsheet that that had the scoring process, and in a year or two, that might have gone into a records retention document management system or something like that. And then they may have left, and someone might have come in, and all of a sudden they don't know where that is, and although that seems kind of implausible, it actually was happening with her more so than not. So they're actually solving that kind of twofold by making sure that just that information goes online, and then if it's online and available to the public, then it would follow the normal retention schedule, so that actually those FOIA requests wouldn't have to come in at all. They would just be able to show those results online. And I'll just quickly show here, evaluation scoring in GovList software is essentially, as you're setting up the RFP and the solicitation language, it automatically creates a scoring system that you can modify. You can change the weight system. So as you're defining the language that you're putting in the RFP, you're actually also setting up the automation for the evaluation as well, which becomes really nice when you start to actually go through the process of reviewing and scoring your proposals, that you could actually use the language and the scoring system that you were setting up in your RFP to actually go in and score your results as well. So in as much as we possibly can, we're trying to make that process really seamless and automated, so that when I have made my scores, given my comments, and submitted them, I know that I can look at this very easily and know that I've finished that process, and that as someone who is managing the scoring and the evaluation process, I can actually see all the aggregations, and have it placed in a system where I have a record that is auditable and available. If any of the internal staff gets asked any questions about it, then you know exactly where to go. All right. So this next one is very near and dear to me, in that um, this is actually a topic that gets discussed a lot in the marketing realm, and it can really apply really nicely in the what I'll call vendor attraction realm. And that's creating a vendor funnel. And those items over to the left, awareness, interest, desire, action, are really good ways for you to think about how you would want to attract local vendors to respond to your solicitations. Excuse me. So, unfortunately, awareness can't really be like, here's your RFP. Like, boom, 40-page PDF. Like, have fun. And that's actually what we see a lot is like the first time that I know about something, it's like I open it up and there's an RFP, right? And I look at it, it's 35 pages. Like, I take a deep breath, exhale, and I'm like, okay, am I gonna read through this? Like, where do I start? And I've been doing this for 20 years. I can imagine what it's like for a person doing it for the first time, or for a person who's just doing it for the first time, like this year, which I'm sure happens to everyone, both internally and externally. It also can't be like we have an RFP, click here to register in order to learn more, right? Like I went out to a website yesterday, a city website yesterday, and there was a listing of the RFPs. It's like a table, a title, RFP for lawn care services, say for instance. And so, or I think it was like RFP for building maintenance, and that's all I got. And so, but when I clicked on it, like they had like a software system that allowed you to view the RFP, but I can't view it unless I register, right? I can't even get like an introduction to it unless I register. I can't follow it unless I like fill in this information and give you my EIN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of a sudden, like I'm stuck with like having to fill out this process just so I can read the summary of what the RFP is about. And so, so one of the things that our software is able to do, but also you can do right now is, even before the RFP goes out, a one-page summary. Like, okay, so what would go into a one-page summary? Of course, like there's language that gets created already, right? It's the purpose of the RFP, the introduction, the summary, the background. If there's a budget, that would be discussed. Actually, we hear that a lot from the companies that are responding. It's like, I really wish that they would be more open about the budget. So if you have that and you want to put that in there, that's great. Like that would be really great information. What else might go into that one-page summary? Well, if you talk about the positive qualities of a vendor that might win the RFP, then all of a sudden, like I didn't have to read a 40-page RFP to like read like the 3 bullet points of like what makes a good vendor, in your mind. And so if I know that if I haven't even registered yet, right? But if I look at that and I'm like, oh, that could be me, right? Just by reading those bullet points, then that is actually, then I would want to take that next step, right? Which is that getting them to express interest. Another thing that you might want to include or talk about not only positive qualities, but talk about the things that would disqualify me right up front from winning this RFP, right? So even before this is released, right? Even before this is public, like you could put information out about, what makes you, or actually when it goes live, you could do it as well. Like just read the one-page summary, talks about the things that you look for in a vendor, talk about things that would disqualify you, like if there's a certain minimum requirements of number of years they've been in business or whatever that might be. They have to provide certain number of references, or they have to be licensed, or whatever those requirements are. You get those things out there right now, and then if they know that they qualify and they know what disqualifies them, then all of a sudden, like I'm going to be willing to press that button that says I'm interested, right? And so that's why we call it a funnel, because at the top of the funnel you've got let's say from that list of folks who've read that one pager that's out on your social media site or that was sent through notification, that they're not responding yet, they're just interested, right? And so And so we give, you want to provide some way for you to be able to collect who are like the 10 vendors who are interested based off of this one pager, right? And then so from those 10 vendors, right, then you take them a little bit deeper, right? So they're going to click a button and says, okay, I'm interested. It might be like giving you their email address. It might just be like giving you their phone number. It might be, them reading about your one pager on a notice board in the library. Whatever way that you're doing to publicize this, right? From there, then you know that those folks, they've read that and you've gated them through that process. And so the next part is, let's do like a 30-minute, maybe it's like a 30-minute, this is your your site meeting, or even like given like a 30-minute online webinar, like what we're doing right now. Maybe, but it's worth your time, right? Like it's worth doing this with these folks because you know that they feel like that they meet the qualifications, right? And so from then, now you're educating them. You're taking them through the next step, which is like they're interested, they're expressing a desire, right? And so because they're expressing a desire, then out of those 10, 5 of them might, after reading that sort of like next level, say, you know what, I'm going to apply. Now, if there's a way that I can at that point say, okay, you're going to apply. I need you to fill out a business license. I need you to, give us your EIN. I need you to tell me all this information about you, right? But like you wait and do that when and I'm going to be a lot more willing to do that, right, at that moment, because like I'm expressing interest. Like I know I'm going to take action on that, right? And so at that moment, like all of a sudden filling out vendor information makes a ton of sense. Doing it before then, actually doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And I think there a lot of times people just like leave the process before even getting to that opportunity to understand it, have a conversation with you, and then decide that they want to. The final part of this is actually guiding them in the response. And so, what is an example of what that might look like? So in software is, I might be looking on your webpage and I'm seeing like these lists of projects that are available for me to, available for me to get more information about, right? And so I click on that, I come to this page, right? And so I'm learning about it. I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm just like getting the introduction, the background, the vendor qualifications, the things that disqualify you. I'm just reading that stuff, right? And I don't see anything else. Here's my timeline, right? These are just I'm not even necessarily signed in, right? But at that moment, if I find that I'm interested, then I can just follow. And what follow is essentially just I'm going to receive emails now. And so you get to like have directed communication towards those people who are just following, but not necessarily applying to the project. I'll come back in later if I'm deciding that I want to actually apply to the project. Then I can do that. And at that moment, then the interface changes, right? Then it becomes a little bit more detailed. I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna read through the scope of work and how I want to respond. I'm gonna start uploading my documents. I'm gonna start doing question and answer. I'll do all those things that I would want to do because like now I'm very engaged and I'm very interested in taking action on this. And so as you can see through, I'm showing you how to do it through software, but you can do this actually today, just by doing some of those things that we talked about and sort of like treating, treating this, your projects, with this sort of awareness, interest, desire, action funnel. So you can tell I'm really passionate about this one. Okay, so I know that like some people may be thinking to yourself like, well, when do I get the time to do all that? First of all, hopefully you realize that everything in the last topic is all content really that you're already building. Like it's already there. It's inside the RFP. It's inside the big PDF document. But it's hard to like break out into its pieces. It's it's hard to like just present part of it to them and then present other parts of the other more details to it later. But that's actually one of the kind of important parts of this is not scaring folks away necessarily with like the 10 pages of terms and conditions or sample contracts or whatever. Like there's a time we're going to get to that for sure. it's necessary. Like we have to follow these rules. Like we're spending taxpayer dollars, right? So it's important that those things happen. They just don't necessarily have to happen like right in the beginning. So this one is all about like, well, how do I find the time, right? So saving time in your RFP development process opens the door for a lot of these other really cool things. What you may not have time to do is some of the creative stuff, like making the one pager educational and inviting, making that information, colorful and creative. You may not have the time to connect with your community about these opportunities in the way that you'd like, because you're like pushing documents and emails and tracking changes, and you're retraining and training. Like you're I heard someone say once, like, I feel like that I'm the person that's beating people over the head with information over and over and over, which honestly just wasn't that rewarding to that person. So that's why, like, having systems in place that can help you gain some time efficiencies in this process, that actually opens, that's what happens to the save time. Like some of it you'll contribute to other activities. Some of it will also go into thinking creatively about procurements, like creating videos, reaching out to new vendors, doing a little, doing that extra. I say lanyap. The I'm from Louisiana, so it's that little something extra, and that's going to, it's that lanyap that will help you, make that connection with your community. And ultimately, that creative energy is more valuable than the time spent on routine tasks, and that can really make the difference when it comes time to finding the best vendors. So these are just sort of some, some information analytics that you can get out of our software. And this is what people are saying right now about what's going on in this realm of developing solicitations. These articles just came out. It's resonating with customers and anyone who's touching the RFP and the government purchasing process. That, as they say here, it's technology isn't a silver bullet, but it is an essential part of the toolkit. And so, in one case, our customer, based off of the data that they're collecting, when they're rolling this out, agency enterprise wide, like they're looking at over 100,000 hours of labor savings annually. And so what that means is being able to do some of these things, being able to get out into the community, and connect with your communications folks, and start thinking creatively about the different channels of how you can invite more local vendors to respond. So this is, in summary, 5 ways to connect procurement to community. Number 1, we talked about organizing clear, repeatable RFP sections, which you're already doing. A lot of folks are already doing that, but the part that can start to make a big difference is the inclusion of the expectation and the intent behind each of those sections, putting them in the sections, putting them at the top of the sections, so that both internally staff can understand, okay, this is submission instructions versus scope of work versus a vendor response versus project approach. Just a little bit of language that helps both the internal staff, because it's not always going to be the same person creating this, right? And they're only typically building these things like once or twice a year, if even that, right? So they're not going to be really good at this. We don't expect them to. So just having some instructional language in there can really be helpful. And then offering that same instructional language out to the public, so that they know that you have a process, and that you have a template, and here's the expectation and the understanding behind it. That's the first part. Second is leveraging existing community communications connections. If your agency has a Twitter feed, which most do, a LinkedIn feed, a Facebook page, subscriptions on your website, almost a lot of websites that I see now have a place where citizens can go and they can sign up to be notified. And it's not the vendor portal, it's something else. It's the email list of your citizens in your community. So being able to just attach to that, and it's all automated, could be really important. And an open decision process. So this is just around like being transparent. It's stuff that you already know, but if you if you can show your public that you have an evaluation process, and that you and actually, the tool that you're using to build that language is the same tool that you're using to automate the evaluation and scoring. If they know that this is happening, and they have access to it readily, then that trust can lead to more and better responses. And then there's the funnel. I'm sorry, awareness at the top, generating awareness, generating interest, generating desire, and then ultimately generating action. And then the last one is just all these things, like how do we get it? How do we get to the place where we can do these things? And one of the best ways is to get creative about how you can save time in the process. I'll just relay a story. One of our customers, again, as you saw on the news article on the previous slide, they went from an average of about 246 hours per solicitation development internally to less than 30 hours. So if someone's getting like 10x efficiency, you might be able to get half efficiency, and then that efficiency can then be turned around and be utilized to do some of these really creative things. And that's where we can really start to get excited about what this could do for us.